Talking Reddit presents r/AskReddit. Doctors of Reddit. What's the biggest case of faking it you've ever seen? Ophthalmology technician. People pretend to be blind all the time. Go to check their eye pressure with the toner pen, a device you poke them directly into the eye with, and they go, "What the fuck is that thing?" Obligatory not a doctor. I'm a nurse. We had a guy who had to come in every 3 months to get a medical certificate to say he couldn't work at his retail job due to severe disabling back pain. He was receiving large amounts of insurance money for this condition. After the doctor had done his usual examination and questions and signed it off, the guy asks the doctor to check his shoulder, which the doctor does, and asks how he injured it. Guy says, "Playing rugby for a competitive team." "Really?" says doctor. "How long have you been playing for them?" Guy has been playing and training the whole time. Doc puts this info on insurance form. Doc loses his shit in staff room laughing. Next week the patient loses his shit in reception because his insurance has been cancelled. Had a patient come in for a fall, who now couldn't move their legs at all. Did a bunch of tests, didn't find anything. The patient was not at all fazed by suddenly being paralyzed, which was the first red flag. Didn't really believe anything was wrong, but the patient was still not moving their legs. My options are to admit for a huge workup, or get them to walk. So I update them saying everything is fine, tests are negative. You can go home. Patient gets up, gets dressed and walks out without a word. So I update them saying everything is fine, tests are negative. You can go home. Patient gets up, gets dressed and walks out without a word. Jesus. We had a patient faking a seizure, so my supervisor told one of us to get the brain needle. The patient made a miraculous and swift recovery without intervention. That's the best part about most of these stories, when they make up some form of fake machine so that the patient stops faking. Cracks me up every time. Nurse for an ophthalmologist here. Had a 21-year-old new patient claiming to be completely blind from a sudden and severe glaucoma diagnosis from a previous unknown doctor. Would feel around while walking, tried to keep eyes rolled back into his head. The whole 9 yards. He said he is a famous YouTube rapper that is now unable to make videos or earn a living. I exclaimed to have heard of him before and very excitedly asked him to search and show me his YouTube channel on my phone so that I could subscribe. He took my phone out of my hand and effortlessly found the YouTube app and typed away in the search bar. Oh, and of course his eyes were back to normal and focused. Had a patient when I was an intern feigning blindness. She would constantly be playing on her smartphone, only furiously trying to hide it when someone from the care team came into her room. The best was when my attending one day strolled past her room and threw his hand up in a highly exaggerated hello wave. She started to throw her arm up too, but caught herself halfway through, then threw her hand back into her lap and pretended to be staring off into nothing. I would never have expected pretending to be blind to be such a commonly faked issue, but reading this thread has changed my mind on that issue. My brother was an EMT for 2 years, and he told me this. People will try to use the ambulance as a means for transportation from Fulton to Oswego, because the hospital is in Oswego, by faking seizures. Sometimes when the head EMT guy was feeling fun and knew that the person was faking, he'd say something like, "Man, it's weird that he's having seizures but not peeing himself." Apparently, the person would kind of snap out of it for a second, weigh up the repercussions, then either pee themselves or stop faking. I thought that was hilarious. We had a family calling for a Medicab, a cab paid for by income-based insurance, from somewhere out in the sticks, to our ER in a college town every few weeks or so. The mum would be seen for some ailment or the other, and the rest of the family would go to Walmart, go to the mall, do all their in-town errands. She was basically faking an emergency illness every few weeks so they wouldn't have to pay for a cab to get their shopping done. Young, 18-20, woman went running into small rural hospital pretending to have abdominal pain. Police officer had tagged her going 40+ km over the limit, which was stunt driving as per the new law in Ontario, impound and license suspension automatic. Cop followed her into and apparently said he'd be waiting for her when she left. Locum staff such as myself were housed at a small B&B about 15 minutes away, and the had pre-printed order sets to be done before we arrived. When I arrived, she flat out admitted that she just came in because she freaked out and didn't stop. I told her we'd give her 45 minutes to call her parents and family before I booted her. Except, BHCG came back positive, and subsequent ultrasound came back showing extremely early ectopic. Officer figures out something is up when he hears air ambulance call coming over radio. She was completely asymptomatic, and just worked out that she dodged both charges, and a life-threatening issue by accident. It was definitely a WTF moment. Edit. Well, this blew up overnight. I got a few messages. A little more info. Small rural hospitals in northern Ontario often service areas from more than an hour's drive away, and still only have a catchment area of 2,000 to 3,000 people. When on call it was just that, we would do our days in the community clinic, then maybe hospital rounds, then go home and be on call. We wouldn't be at the hospital. There wasn't an on-call room where you would stay, for example. There were lots of times that you'd go a full night without being woken up, or maybe just a call from the acute care inpatient wing. Locums were short-term contracts for places that didn't have full-time medical staff for whatever reason. It's hard to attract clinicians if you don't even have broadband internet in the community. They generally pay very well. Physical therapist here. Working mom comes into the clinic with her infant in a stroller. She's limping like she's got a nail in her foot. Wincing in pain and tears in her eyes. She's crying during her visit with the PT. None of us think she's faking it. She limped out of the clinic. I glanced out of the window and saw this woman, bounding down the sidewalk. Hips swaying, full stride, going places. We were all fools. Sort of along the same idea. Working at a pharmacy, we saw a guy come in to try and get a refill on some pain meds that had no refill. After pleading that his ear really hurt, we told him again, we couldn't refill it. One of the other employees saw his step into a side hallway, take a pencil and jam it forcefully into his ear repeatedly, drawing blood. He calmly left and went to the ER. He came back a few hours later with the prescription for pain meds. I once saw a patient who had been faking paralysis of the legs for years. Used a wheelchair, never walked, etc. Old records showed extensive imaging, neurology consults, and other tests that proved the patient had full function of all extremities. Family and friends were just going along with it. Not sure if it was really conversion disorder, or if the patient had some secondary gain issue. That's so baffling. I'm a part-time wheelchair user, and I don't know why anyone would choose to make the world more inaccessible to themselves. Taking trauma call during surgery residency. Had a prisoner come in after a fight, and claimed he couldn't move or feel his legs. All the CT scans and MRIs were normal, but we would shield his legs so he couldn't see them, and poke them with needles and other sharp objects with enough force to cause pain. He never flinched or moved his legs at all. He was diagnosed with SURA, spinal cord injury without radiographic abnormality. He stayed in the hospital for a week, no improvement. Always had one guard with him. One night, they were down in the lobby watching some television, but the guard needed to use the restroom. The patient said, "Where could I possibly go? I'm paralyzed." Guard left him alone for 2 minutes. Patient last seen sprinting down the road, naked butt cheeks flapping in the breeze. Made it to a city 4 hours away by car before he was caught again. I have never seen anyone fake it so well. Truly playing the long con. Not a doctor, but worked in healthcare for nearly 20 years. While taking a break from the ICU, due to it being emotionally draining, I worked in home health for a bit. I had a patient who clearly had Munchausen syndrome. On a daily basis, she would call her insurance to see what things would be covered if she was diagnosed with this or that. She called her doctor's office an average of 5 times during my shift with her. She would report all kinds of non-real symptoms. She pestered the doctors into do exploitive laparoscopic surgery. Of course nothing was found. One day I walked in and she was rubbing her incisions with rotten cabbage trying to get it infected. She wasn't seeking pain meds, except to sell. Really, she was just as happy with antibiotics or stool softeners. Anything, as long as they wrote her a prescription and she got to go to the pharmacy where she did a whole song and dance for them too, claiming allergies and reactions. She always increased the exaggeration of her story too. One time she fluttered her eyes, after making sure I was looking, and said she lost consciousness in that half a second. She called the doctor and claimed she lost consciousness for 5 minutes. She called the insurance and claimed it was 10 minutes. She called the pharmacy and claimed it was 30 minutes. Then she called 911 and told them she woke up on the floor after losing consciousness for 4 hours. The worst thing about her was she was a mom. Her son was 28 at the time, and by all the stories of his childhood illnesses, and all her saying how he is severely disabled, I knew she basically fucked up his childhood with Munchausen by proxy. She portrayed him as being severely disabled and that's why he would never find a wife. I met him, he was healthy and of average intelligence. He wasn't looking for a wife, he was gay, but she refused to accept that. Working with her was so miserable that I took a couple years off from any and all healthcare after that. This patient comes in for back pain with weakness of the legs. Gets a full workup with MRI, standard blood work, and then some immunological things to look for stuff like myasthenia gravis. No neurological or immunological explanation for the weakness. Patient is seen by physical therapy, and they are of the opinion that the patient is holding back intentionally. Go to see the patient at the end of the day, and prep them for discharge. Patient is infuriated that they're being discharged. Yelling and screaming about how they aren't better, how they're disappointed in the institution, blah blah blah. They said one particular thing that still clearly stands out 3 to 4 years later. "I can't believe you're sending me home already. I haven't even told my family I'm here, and now you're going to send me home before they even have the chance to see me?" My attending and I leave the room to arrange things with the nurses. We go back in and the patient is out of bed and standing up in the middle of the room. Miraculously the patient is able to walk with zero assistance when they had so much difficulty with any assistance over the previous 2 days. At that point, they were enraged. We went into the room without knocking. They were discharged home after a conversation regarding abuse of medical services. You look like you've enjoyed this video, so give it a thumbs up, it's free, and consider subscribing for more content. Have a wonderful day.